Tonight,
we'll cut the deficit by nearly $3 trillion over the next 10 years.
President Biden releases a budget plan with a big goal, what the proposal includes. Plus, train crash testimony.
How deeply sorry I am for the impact this derailment has had on the residents of East Palestine.
The head of Norfolk Southern grilled by lawmakers about safety and the railroad company. And how Christians in Turkey are coming together to bring hope after multiple earthquakes devastated the country. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
A battle over the budget lies ahead for President Biden. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
From our Washington Bureau, I'm John Jessup. Well, $6.8 trillion, that's the cost of the president's new budget proposal, which also adds to military spending. Still, the White House maintains it will cut nearly $3 trillion from the deficit over the next decade.
Now, it also raises taxes and aims to create new social programs for the middle and lower classes. Caitlin Burke joins us now with tonight's top story. Caitlin, does this budget plan stand a chance of getting through Congress?
John, Jenna, short answer, no. When it comes to spending, Congress holds the purse strings. While the Senate may be able to push the plan through, the Republican-controlled House has already deemed the budget dead on arrival.
Trying to grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up and not the top down.
Biden's budget proposals fall into four main categories: deficit reduction, bringing down costs for families, protecting and strengthening Medicare and Social Security, and investing in America. Many of the president's plans also involve raising taxes, which Republicans call unnecessary.
If you look at the revenue that's coming into America today, it's higher than at any 50-year average. We've only topped this 2 other times have we met at the same time. But our expenses are much higher. And if you look, since he's been in office, the added $6 trillion. If you look at the 30% increase in discretionary spending just in the last 4 years, that has been a real challenge. And I think that's where the real problem lies.
Democrats, meanwhile, accuse the GOP of targeting programs that average Americans rely on, like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, to try to achieve a balanced budget.
Their fantastical plan, I call it fantastical, to balance the budget in 10 years would decimate the middle class, decimate the wallets of every American family, and undo the progress we've made over the last 2 years.
McCarthy maintains cuts to those programs are off the table. As Congress argues over how to bring down the national debt, both sides agree something must be done. U.S. debt currently sits at $32 trillion, expected to reach $50 trillion by 2030.
In the next 10 years, Americans will pay $10.5 trillion just on the interest on our debt. Now, to put that in perspective, since 1940 till today, America has only paid $9 trillion in interest. So in the next 10 years, we'll pay more than we paid in the last 80 years.
I'm ready to meet with the Speaker anytime, tomorrow, if he has his budget. Lay it down, tell me what you want to do, I'll show you what I want to do, see what we can agree on, what we don't agree on, let's see what we vote on.
Even before Biden's budget proposal, lawmakers have looked ahead to another money issue, the debt ceiling. With the government set to run out of money by mid-August, the country could default if Congress doesn't raise it, something Republicans say they're unwilling to do until they see some concessions on spending. John, Jenna?
All right, Caitlin, thank you so much. Well, here with us now is Stephen Skanke, Chief Economic Advisor at Kill Point. Stephen, maybe you can help explain this for me. I've always been a little bit confused by the fact that presidents have said things like, you know, over the next 10 years, this will cut trillions of dollars. If a sitting president is reelected, they're only in office for 10 years. So explain how the president's plan would cut deficits over 3 years, over $3 trillion over 10 years, like he says.
Well, it shows a program of higher taxes that continue to grow over time. He eliminates some waste and fraud. He improves collections through the IRS by increasing the IRS budget by 15% in the budget that he's put up there. And so then it's assumptions that they continue to move along the direction that he has outlined in his budget. And lo and behold, when you project it out over 10 years, there's $3 trillion deficit reduction savings. But as we know, this president is in office for 2 more years unless he's reelected, and whoever comes after him will have his own budget ideas. And even if he's reelected, the Congress is going to decide what they do with revenue increases or tax cuts. I mean, we've seen tax cuts a number of times, as recently in 2017. So it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors when when any president stands up and says what you just asked.
Yeah, you know, the Biden administration's gotten a lot of criticism for some of its big spending. Your take and how the Biden administration's spending has added to the deficit, Steve?
Well, it has, Jenna, and the problem that we have with inflation right now is, at least in part, the massive fiscal stimulus that was put into the economy in 2020 and 2021. And for a $25 trillion economy in fiscal year 2022, we had $1.4 trillion deficit fiscal stimulus, current year estimated to be $1.6 trillion. In the president's new budget, $1.8 trillion, which is remarkable when you have the economy at 3.5 or 3.4% unemployment, more job vacancies, by a factor of 2 than there are people unemployed, and yet $1.5 trillion in fiscal stimulus coming into the economy as the Federal Reserve is trying to rein in inflation.
All right, Steve Skanke, we have to leave it there. Steve Skanke with Keel Point. Thank you so much. Good to see you this evening.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Well, an apology and promises and promises of action meet renewed demand for accountability following the toxic train derailment in Ohio. More than a month after the accident, today senators got their chance to grill the head of the Norfolk Southern train company. A day of reckoning.
I want you to tell me why everybody in my community is getting sick.
And atonement.
I want to begin today by expressing how deeply sorry I am.
The chief of the company responsible for the derailment in the hot seat in the Senate.
Corporate greed, outdated railway safety regulations, lax hazardous material standards were all the fuel on a toxic fire that was ready to combust.
Norfolk Southern CEO Alan Shaw promising yet again to thoroughly clean the crash site and surrounding areas.
I am determined to make this right. Norfolk Southern will clean the site safely, thoroughly, and with urgency. You have my personal commitment.
Which means Norfolk Southern putting up millions for affected regions and touting a 6-point plan to improve rail safety, including enhanced real-time warnings to crews.
While this is Norfolk Southern's train, their wreck, and their mess, the entire apparatus of state government has been mobilized to assist.
With the toxic cleanup still underway, EPA representatives are vouching for the safety of the region's water and air.
EPA monitors have not detected any volatile organic compounds above levels of health concerns.
Now facing new questions over the intentional burning of certain hazardous chemicals carried by the train, including vinyl chloride, associated with increased cancer risks.
It's their responsibility, and they weren't even considered before this decision to vent and burn it in the middle of a town.
We were at risk of a catastrophic rupture that would have resulted in uncontrolled release of hazardous material.
Then how do we know that the car wasn't working properly to begin with? Someone may need to be held responsible that made the decision to burn this off.
As to the potential continuing environmental and health threat, a point-blank question.
Would you live there, given what you've seen?
Yes, sir.
And President Biden, after initially declining to visit the site of the toxic train crash, now says he intends to visit, quote, at some point. The Norfolk Southern chief and EPA representatives told Senator Graham They would join the president if asked to do so.
Well, House GOP members continue their investigation into what they call the weaponization of the government. They say the federal government warned Twitter about Hunter Biden's laptop scandal prior to the 2020 election. Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee also argued Twitter censored posts about it once the story broke in an effort to help Joe Biden win the election. Today, journalist Mike Taibbi testified about the allegations of censorship.
I'm here today because of a series of events that began late last year when I received a note from a source online. It read, "Are you interested in doing a deep dive into what censorship and manipulation was going on at Twitter?" A week later, the first of what became known as the Twitter Files reports came out. The original promise of the internet was that it might democratize the exchange of information globally. What we found in the files was a sweeping effort to reverse that promise and use machine learning and other tools to turn the internet into an instrument of censorship and social control. Unfortunately, our own government appears to be playing a lead role.
Democrats on the committee say the so-called Twitter files don't show coordination between Twitter and the government. Rather, they reflect a conversation about content moderation. Well, Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is in the hospital this evening after tripping and falling Wednesday night at a Washington hotel. The 81-year-old was attending a private dinner when he took a tumble. According to a spokesperson, he'll be in the hospital for a few days being treated for a concussion.
From jobs to interest rates, all things economy next on Faith Nation.
Welcome back. To the economy tonight, a big jump in unemployment applications. According to new numbers from the Labor Department, jobless claims were up by 21,000 last week, with 211,000 people seeking aid. That's the biggest surge in 5 months. And the first time in 8 weeks, new applications rose above 200,000. Even so, jobless claims remain historically low. Tomorrow, the Labor Department will release the February jobs report. The Dow Jones is estimating 225,000 positions were added to the economy.
And here now for more, Mark Hamrick, Washington Bureau Chief and Senior Economic Analyst with Bankrate. Mark, welcome. So the January jobs report was a huge surprise, showing more than 500,000 jobs added to the economy. Mark, was that an anomaly? What can we expect from tomorrow's report?
I think most of us feel like it was an anomaly, John and Jenna, in the sense of it would not likely be repeated. That was a whopper of a jobs report. However, the consensus among economists is that the unemployment rate might remain at 3.4% with the updated data, but we won't have the same level of jobs creation. And along with all of that, we'll also be looking at wage growth. And there is an expectation that we'll see some acceleration of wage growth, which is something workers enjoy. Bosses, not so much, and definitely not at the Federal Reserve, where they're trying to get inflation under control.
Yeah, we saw a little bit of that testy exchange with the Fed yesterday. Mark, the Labor Department's unemployment numbers show a big rise in new applications this week, continuing on claims that were, continuing claims were also up. What's behind these jumps?
Well, we also had a data set, John and Jenna, from Challenger Gray and Christmas, which keeps track of job cut announcements. And January and February combined represented the largest number of such job cut announcements since 2009 for those 2 months. A third of those job cuts were in technology. So it does appear, we'll have to wait and see what we monitor in forthcoming jobless claims readings, but it does appear that finally this large number of layoffs and job cut announcements that we've been seeing are now filtering into the economy. Part of that may have taken some time because people were getting severance payments. No doubt some people found employment. And this may now finally be some moderation in the job market, the likes of which we've seen in other sectors. For example, in the housing market, the stock market's been weak. And we may now see the broader economy stumble just a bit.
Mark, you mentioned, Fed Chair Jerome Powell taking questions from lawmakers this week. What was your big takeaway?
Well, he told us all, really, Jenna, that there's a possibility that interest rates may have to go higher than previously expected and stay higher for longer. But that decision will be dependent on the jobs report due out Friday, as well as the consumer price index due out next Tuesday. If we get unpleasant surprises, meaning pointing to more inflation, then the Fed could raise interest rates by 0.5 point on the 22nd of March, but we got a long way to go before we get there.
Quickly here, Mark, the Fed's Beige Book survey just came out. I believe it comes out multiple times throughout the year. Can you tell us about it and what it measures?
Well, it is essentially a survey of all the Federal Reserve districts across the country, and they are in touch with business contacts about economic conditions across the country. And really what we're seeing is that economic growth or activity was expanding in about half the districts and was not in the other half. So it's obviously a mixed bag out there, but what I think it does point to is that the economy is beginning to feel the impacts of the rate hikes that began a year ago.
All right, Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst and Washington Bureau Chief at Bankrate. Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
And coming up, meeting needs in the Middle East, how churches are working to bring help and hope to earthquake survivors in Turkey.
Welcome back. The recent earthquakes in Turkey destroyed thousands of buildings, among them churches. Still, tragedy is not stopping Christians from coming together to help.
As Chris Mitchell reports from Turkey, they are uniting to bring relief and comfort to survivors of the quakes.
Deliveries of supplies continue to pour in to St. George's Greek Orthodox Church in Iskenderun, Turkey, from different Christian organizations.
We had massive damage in this area of Turkey, and the thing that warmed our heart is that our people in Turkey, and also outside of Turkey, they helped immediately. This gave us hope.
Some of the relief came through the Shy Fund, an organization dedicated to helping the church in the Middle East.
We are trying to gather as much as help we can to the people who just survived the earthquake, which are still in need.
It's a moving reminder of how different parts of the church can work together.
We delivered the stuff to the church. They're distributing to people because they know people better than us.
And church unity became a major theme CBN News heard, even in the midst of devastation.
It's amazing. I think that's one of the encouraging parts is that churches from different denominations, different backgrounds are coming together like there is no divide and working together to do what needs to be done. The passage is that they'll know us by our love. I feel like this is exactly what that looks like, is the church being the church.
Turksat 7 Senem Ekoner came here to document what happened to the church after the earthquake.
Many of the church buildings are completely on the ground. They've lost, our brothers and sisters have lost their church buildings. The congregations, which is the body of Christ actually, spread everywhere as we speak. Some of them remain behind to help with the rescue efforts and distributing help, everything they can. And the whole church in the country has been utilizing help, sending help, people to just run to whoever is in need of help. And by praying,
Ekoner found a country in grief and a church in one accord.
How God is actually showing himself in people, being Christ to one another, as the body of Christ, in unity, amazing unity, and just functioning together as his hands, as his feet, reaching out to people. So I've been seeing that. I've been trying to console. Words are not sufficient, of course, and it's time to just cry with them over their loss. And also just be Christ to people, that they're never alone and we're in this together, because you can't really completely detach yourself from what your fellow brothers and sisters and your country going through.
St. George's Church survived. Many did not. So many churches were destroyed during the earthquake, including this one in Iskenderun, St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Cathedral, built in 1870.
Church is meaningful with people, so the church in itself is just a building. So if we want to feel love and be meaningful, We need people.
Global Christian Relief is there to tell the story to the larger church body, especially in the U.S.
It is critical, I think, for the church to be involved. And I think for us, it's one of those things where the media covers this for a short time, then it'll slip away. But we're really praying and trying to work to keep it in front of the church in America. So it's not just a short blast of giving and prayer, but it's an ongoing support for the believers here, but for everybody.
After the earthquake, many look to the church.
We hear a lot of people just running to the church, not away from it, to ask for help. We're trying to be able to help people to believe there is another hope to survive, to go on with this life. Christ said he's the new life. We have to believe in the new life. Otherwise, we cannot go on under this situation, with this depression, with this everything is going really bad in this country right now.
CBN News also talked with Tuma Selak, one of the only 4 Christian members of the Turkish parliament.
And that is exactly what Christianity gives us. Christ told us, love your neighbors more than yourself. That's why we see, especially among Christians, how they really help each other, and that really gives me hope for the future.
Many told CBN News, don't forget the church in Turkey.
I want to say any Christians in the world, I would like to ask them really not to lose hope. And don't let us to lose hope. They can always support with prayers, they can always support with just a little bit help. Every little bit help just changed lives in here. And thank you so much.
Maybe the stones don't speak. That's why I need to speak. We do need to rebuild those buildings. I do expect help from all the world, especially from Christians, to rebuild our churches because we need Christianity to go on in Turkey.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Iskenderun, Turkey.
And finally tonight, an elderly man is home after spending a week stuck in his snow-covered car on a remote California highway.
That's right. 81-year-old Jerry Duray was on his way to visit family when his car got stuck in a snowbank. The Air Force veteran conserved his vehicle's gas and battery, keeping warm with a quilt he had handy and surviving off of, get this, croissants and snow. After a week, he was rescued by helicopter and taken to the hospital where his vitals were remarkably strong. His grandson praising God and calling his rescue a miracle indeed, but also just a great thing to have a whole box of croissants.
And not the worst fuel to be stuck with.
No, not at all.
We're so glad he's okay.
Amen to that.
That's going to do it for Faith Nation tonight.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.